My name is Marquard Smith. I'm the moderator and a professor of artistic research at Vilniaus Academy of Art. I'd like to thank the Academy and also the Academy's press for supporting this event, and also to the Vilnius Book Fair for hosting us. We're here to celebrate the Lithuanian translation of Gilda Williams' fantastic book. Many of you will already know it in English. It's now available in Lithuanian at a bookstore near you.
Thank you.
There are only so many microphones. There we go. Gilda is with us, ladies and gentlemen. It's fantastic to have her here, and she's going to be presenting for 15 minutes. And then it's also my pleasure to be able to introduce Agnė Narušytė, who's an critic, curator, and works at the Academy as well. And she will be responding over 2 or 3 minutes with some comments in response to Gilda's presentation. What we want to do is to make as much time available for you guys to ask questions, and so hopefully we will have around 25 or 30 minutes for discussion and question and after Gilda's presentation. So please join me in welcoming Gilda Williams. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Mark, for that lovely introduction. Thank you to everyone at the Vilnius Academy and the publishers. It's been wonderful to be here. Thank you for coming. So I will present a little bit my book on how to write. The book, as you'll see, has good examples of art writing, has terrible examples of art writing, and explain, what's the difference, why do some work, why do some not work. The first question we might ask is, why is there so much writing in art in the first place? I mean, it used to be not everyone had to write. It used to be just critics had to write. Now everyone has to write. Students have to write, artists have to write, curators, collectors, galleries. We are a text-producing industry. There it is. There's my book. This I found on Instagram. I love this picture. And I've made a little Lithuanian version, which is really good. So I like to start with this picture. This is from 1903. These are critics arriving at the Salon in Paris to look at the artworks. And you can see the artworks have been brought out like lambs to slaughter to the critics, who will now respond and put into words, explain the meaning in words of the artworks. Okay? Those are actually umbrellas. They look like bayonets. They look like guns, rifles, but they're not. They're just umbrellas. But it's like a feeding frenzy. Okay? They're going to attack these works however they want. No one is speaking on behalf of the art. The artists certainly aren't, and neither is anyone else. So it was a one-sided system. There was one voice, and that was the critic's voice. And this is, of course, a terrible model of engagement. And it just got worse. And the most famous example is, of course, Pollock, who Clement Greenberg did all the talking for him. In fact, Pollock had a lot of things to say about his work, and Greenberg said, "Don't be an idiot." All right? So the artist was basically, the artist was like a monkey, right? He was like, he just threw paint, and he made grunts, and he couldn't actually articulate what he was doing, all right? And then luckily you had the sophisticated critic who could put it into words, all right? And needless to say, artists complained about this system. They didn't, this was not, it's like the artist has, an abstract word, the figure has jumped out of the artwork, and there's the critic who's going to put words to the art. All right? And we have seen a democratization of language. Everyone is entitled to speak about art, not just singular art critics. This is when we've lost our power as critics. But on the plus side, this is a cartoon from the 50s from Matt Reiner. Artists got sick of it, all right? And on the back of that, they invented ways, this is Robert Smithson making heaps of language, they invented ways to combine text and image. Sometimes using machines. This is, of course, Warhol taping. Warhol was one of the first people on Earth to own a recorder, not one of the first artists, first people on Earth. And so there's a fraught relationship. And there was an assumption in the 60s that if you needed no skill to make art, so you needed no skill to write about art. All right? It was a D-skill proposition. A machine could do it. And we all know that's not really true. And we are a book and a language-producing industry. This is the bookshop at the Tate Museum. We pretend that really we produce art and alongside that text, but actually we are, the art world, a text-producing industry. And we should admit it, and we should train and learn how to do it. With that, I'm going to give you a bad example and then a good example. So I go to see an exhibition of Middle Eastern art alongside Frieze Art Fair, and I know nothing about this art. It's a great show. I dutifully buy the catalog to understand what is this work about. And I look at the work, and it's all very interesting, and the catalog reads like this. It's terrible writing. In brief, our exhibition is a response to an exigent disparity of critical discourse evident in the putative designation of form as subaltern to content, and the posturing of referent and iconological as the cardinal gateway for all understanding when it comes to contemporary art in the Middle East. All right. It's incomprehensible, this line. I have read it and reread it. I've tried to have it explained to me. It's something about figuration and language, apparently, but where's that? I don't know. Please don't write like this. Please, I'm begging you. There's a lot of problems with this, and one of the most obvious is that it's just a collection of abstract terms. All right, it's actually 45 words long, and there's 9 abstractions piled one on top of the other. Officially, you would need to process a whole new concept every 5 words. It's impossible. It's about, you can't keep up with this. This is very, very common, but how I would recommend not trying to express yourself. May I give you, in contrast, a rather better example, I think. This is about a photographer named George Porcari, who I assume you know nothing about, right? He's not a very well-known chap. And this is a text by Chris Kraus, whom you might know, very, very important art writer. She's not actually a critic, interestingly enough. She's mostly a filmmaker and a novelist, but she writes beautifully on art. Okay, so here's my idea of a short but good example. George Porcari modestly describes this work as photojournalism, but his ability to capture the transient sweep of global commerce and culture makes it journalistic in the largest possible sense. There are no portraits in Porcari's work. Everyone in his world is a bystander. Partly for this reason, his pictures of migrant LA, the Mexican border, and Indian souvenir vendors at Machu Picchu are consistently realistic representations. There's none of the colorful energy used as a backdrop for fashion campaign shots of Morocco or Central America. Porcari sees the third world as a participant. His photographs neither depict deplorable squalor nor suggest any reason to celebrate the common humanity shared by viewers and subjects. Everyone here is a tourist. Okay, it's short, but it's really, really interesting, that idea about everyone here is a tourist. And so what does she do? And most writers really do this, good art writers. They tell you what they're looking at. They show you exactly what they're looking at in the work. They point it out. They say, these are the specific images, this is what I'm looking at. They use very concrete terms, like migrants and Indian souvenirs, and they don't use just abstractions. They use concrete terms. They explain it, and they add something. They say, so what? How does this connect to the world at large? They have something to say, and they take you there. All right, and sometimes you can, we were talking about this, sometimes it can be linear, sometimes it can be more like a swooping, you go in and out of the artwork, but basically you're showing someone where you got your ideas. It's very, very simple. And if you look at it, sometimes it can stretch over a whole book or a whole chapter, but it's basically, if you want to kind of break it down, often it breaks down, I think, this way. And if you look at a lot of his work, you know, this everyone here is a tourist idea, it's quite good. It's quite an interesting way in to think about the work, however much you might disagree with it or add to it, or the artist, of course, may change their work a million times. It isn't entirely entitled, but it's not. It's a good way in. And you've now, in the course of a very short 70-word text, you have a good way in to think about this artist's works. That's good, all right? That's a deceptively, I think, sophisticated short text. My favorite art writing ever is 10 words long. It was written in response to this painting, which I'm sure you know, this Goya. It's written across the 19th century. There's multiple authors, but it was described as the baker's family who has just won the big lottery prize. Okay, so it's a critique. He tells you what you're looking at. All right, they're not really regal. They're like anybody. But there's no offense to bakers. It's a very noble profession. I don't want to put them down. But the more you look at this, the more you look at his sort of pastry-like face and her sort of baguette arm and the whole kind of over-carved, over-fed version. It used to be the grocer's family, and then it was changed to the baker, which is really perfect. And they're lucky. They won the lottery of life, okay? They don't deserve to be on the throne any more than anyone else does. So it tells you what he's looking at. Or it is a he, actually, who wrote this text. What they're looking at, why it means, and why we should care. It's a fantastic, I think, piece of very, very short writing, very difficult to do. But do notice, there's a lot of concrete terms, bakers, lotteries, prizes, not a pile of abstractions. Just as by way of contrast, all right, this is a press release of an artist. This is in a gallery in London. This person takes vintage photos and embroiders on top of them, yeah, as you can tell. So the text says, Cockburn is interested in a sense of connection, invoked by awkwardly shared space and experience. She explores the impulsive judgments we make about one another, the fantastical histories, biographies, and characters projected onto unknown faces, our imaginative attempt to understand those around us. Yeah? So you might read that and say, oh, that's not so bad. It's kind of okay. All right? But it's actually, all it is truisms about art. You could say this about any portrait. You could take that text and put it next to Porcari, and it would work. It's fine. It works for any portrait. You could put it next to the Akichi. Works. You could put it next to the Goya, and it works. In fact, it's almost an interesting text next to the Goya. And if you do write, test yourself. If you're writing in response to an artwork, put another artwork next to your text. Does it hold up just the same? You might be worried. If it does, it should be specific. It should respond to that work. So what the book does is go back and forth between examples that hold up, examples that are much weaker examples, and what the difference is, all right? And how to perhaps model your own writing around some of the more interesting writers. And speaking of truisms, this is I wrote this for fun. It is an artist statement that works for every artwork on earth. Whatever you do, whatever your medium is, whatever it is, you can steal it. It's there, copyright free. Take a photograph, steal it. This is not good writing, all right? This is really bad writing. And a lot of bad art writing is not actually looking. It's just saying truisms about art. And you want to become aware of that. Okay, so this, by the way, I did stick in my 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
2 minutes to spare.
2 minutes to spare, excellent. So, yes, excellent. That's my presentation.
Thank you very much
You're
indeed.
very welcome. Okay.
And I'm going to pass over for a couple of minutes to hear about the way that the book has been taken up and used, both in English originally and then more recently in Lithuanian.
Thank you. I will look at the clock. I found this book a couple of years ago when I needed to teach a course of criticism in Art Academy. And you know, I'm practicing critic since 1996, quite a long time. I learned it from my teacher, Alfonsas Andriuškevičius, actually from reading his texts. So it's always kind of awkward to start teaching it, which means I have to say something about how to write criticism. You know, it's inside me. You just do it. So, quick search on Amazon, and I found this book, bought it very quick, transported it very quickly to Lithuania, which cost a lot, and yeah, it was really, really useful, because finally I could tell students how to write, how not to write, but you know, in clear terms. And I actually wanted to quote also this bit of about Goya's painting, because it was also surprising. I was shocked while reading it. I thought, you know, is it criticism? What I want to say is that actually this book confirmed certain points which I knew as a practicing critic, as we know from Andriuškevičius, whom I mentioned. You know, all this school of criticism, for example, be specific, look at the pictures, try to convey what you see, try to prove what you see, which is very important, you know, to show that what you are saying is really there in the picture, and that you have to kind of expand what it says, expand its meaning, or as Baudelaire said, open the horizons with your criticism. Your book confirms that, all these points, but also it shows how it's possible write this kind of succinct criticism to minimize words, because what we do sometimes when you try to explain everything, you know, to argue for everything, then it becomes long. And this day and age actually likes short texts. Tweets. So this, yes, tweets. It's actually a tweet what you wanted. And it's an example from previous centuries. What I want to say with that also is that there are no rules how long text should be, and also about the place of art criticism. Because here in Lithuania, we are now already used to hearing that art criticism is not needed, no place for it in culture. We should close all the culture newspapers, all places for criticizing art. I mean, press releases are enough. That's the general opinion. My colleagues and I, one of them, Laima Kreivitė, is sitting just there and broadcasting it on Facebook. We fight against this attitude. And so when I opened your book and read that there is a great industry of this art writing, maybe not maybe not the best paid, but you know, there is a need for it all over the world. So, you know, it's a very positive message to tell our students, you know, what I'm teaching you. Sometimes I feel guilty that I'm teaching this thing which is not needed. No, this book tells you, the wrong side, you know, it is something important which culture needs, and it needs it in various shapes and forms. One interesting thing was that you provide lots of examples and teach also how to write those various forms, like press releases, labels, blogs or whatever, which have really different purposes and tasks. But students didn't want to learn those. They said, we want to learn art writing, art criticism, you know, this proper creative, evaluative kind, and this we will come to when we need to do it. Okay. You know, it's here in the book, we can use it.
Great.
Use it however you want.
Thank you both very much. We have plenty of time. Comments, questions, please feel free.
I thoroughly read your book actually recently, and I have one question.
Okay.
I found your book very, very aggressive in the way of colonialist approach.
Okay.
And you know, even your examples, what you gave us in the beginning, one was a good example, another one is a bad example. But the bad example shows the level of the colonialism, actually. How the terms, which are actually the form of consumerism for the art world, let's say, is showed for the Eastern world. So it's very clear. You are learning to teach them to hide the colonialism. And extremely, I found ridiculous the moment in your book about Chemikuru language.
About Chemikuru? Oh yeah, okay. I mean, there are a lot of texts that address colonialism. I mean,
but
there,
the problem is that
there.
you are, you know, you are speaking about a high level. You are
no, I'm not talking about high level.
From
I'm talking about
quite
communication.
arrogant position, from the high position of the art critic from the center, from the London. You are speaking about people who are living like 8 people who are speaking, as you say, the language, and you are comparing them with the, let's say, bullshit. But I found it not very adequate to all the book. Might be you have another way to explain it, but it was not very nice to read, because actually Lithuanian language could be also chimikuru in that approach.
Well, that's
And
why the
also-
book exists in Lithuanian. But I mean, communication is communication. I don't think the content has to do with the way things are communicated. If you're interested in the decolonization, then you should talk about that in a clear terms as well. I'm not. I think you're talking about content rather than form.
I think the content and form are all together. If you are separating it, it's a big problem.
Well, okay. Well, thank you for that. And I mean, there are a lot of texts that are about decolonizing culture. I should point a lot of the examples from Mantia Diawara talking about Zeta Keita, or Akwienwizor on Archive Fever, or Hilton Alls on his relationship to masculinity. So the two examples here are not representative of all of the types of writing.
The problem with Akwienwizor is that he is fully adapted himself to the Western world, actually.
Right.
He is a self-colonizer.
Right. Now, I should say, all right.
He is perfectly speaking not only English, but also this art language, which is actually the whole art world is a Western form of the Western colonization, let's say. So writing about it in correct way, it's a double colonization, isn't it?
But I do not think there's one right way to write about art. And I say that over and over in the book. There are an infinity of right ways to write about a book. There's about art. You can be written about in ways that are uncommunicative or not. There was a principle in the book, since it's in English, that I only had English language books, texts. Because once you get into translations, and I might add I was a translator for many years of my life, then you're looking at translation and not about the way the writer planned it. So they're all English language texts, which was a principle that I stick to, because to avoid any confusion there. But I just to be clear, I absolutely do not think there's one way to write about art, and I write it. It's actually the first line in the book says there is no one way to write about art. There isn't. There's an infinity of ways, but there are pitfalls that make things unclear. I suspect you find decolonization in perhaps every book you read. Am I right?
You are right.
Next question, next comment.
Hello. I actually disagree with Reda's Dirgis, because it seems like we are making again this East and West divide, and then being unhappy that the center of power is in the West. Yes, it is, and English is this common language. So I didn't find that your book is somehow biased in that respect, that it reproduces certain power structure. And I think it's actually, we are moving away from the subject talking about these things, because it's about an art writing. And it's very inspiring what you are telling in this book, and these examples. It's actually, you can take any examples from the context and find many other things, which is okay, everybody can read the way they like. But I would be interested to know more about the beginning of your career, how you started writing, and what was the inspiration for you at the very, very beginning of your writing.
Well, and I think this a little bit addresses the question. Like everyone, art writing is it's the worst paid job in the art world. It's usually it's fobbed off, we say. It's given away to the lowest levels of the art world. So entry-level jobs, if you just start at a gallery, or you start at you're the writer, you write the press releases, and you're never trained to do that. And I think a lot of entry-level art workers, are given very complicated jobs and no explanation how to do it. I mean, one thing that was important to me was that I don't just look at art criticism. A lot of art writing isn't. It's dumb press releases, it's dumb newspaper news items, and no one ever tells you how to do that. There's the assumption that there's no technique. Anyone can do it. Any idiot can do it. And we all know that isn't true. So I started writing for press releases for a gallery, and then I went and worked in a magazine, and then I worked in publishing. I did books at Biden Press. And it was important to us when we were doing books to work with young artists and young critics, people who needed coaching through their first important text, which is art. If you've always written 500-word reviews, to help them through their first big 10,000-word book, I had to help them, it wasn't enough to say, no, it's not good enough, do it over, or what's wrong with it, and to help give someone pointers and get them through that. And then I went into academia, and students all struggle to write, every single one. And they wanted really clear, practical, how do I get through academic writing, but also how do I begin to write reviews? It's not so much how to do it, but the really common mistakes, all right, that make things incomprehensible. And there was always, especially among artists, you'd be told, write however you want, and then you get it back and you'd failed. Well, I thought you said, well, it's wrong. How should I do it? However you want, but I'm failing. Like, give me some help, all right? And so that's really, and it was important to me that low-level, non-critical writing was included here, because we pretend it doesn't exist, and we all know it exists, and it exists in great volumes, and often without a writer attached, which is very interesting. There's a lot of unsigned, unauthored writing in the art world, stuff that just bubbles up like lava. It's weird. Introductions and presentations and blurbs and stuff, and so there is a class thing that you're not actually important enough to have your name attached to things, but you write it and don't get paid for it. And so I think there's a lot of issues to really think about how the art writing system works, because it's vast. Look downstairs. Look how many art publications there are, but we slightly pretend that what we're really doing is just making art. We're really producing a lot of text.
Thanks, Lema.
I have some more questions, actually.
Let's just hang on and give people the opportunity to think about formulating a question for themselves.
But no, I welcome the debate.
I love your example with the art workers.
Yeah.
What actually was absent in your book?
No, the whole introduction is about the economics of art writing.
About economics, yes, but not about the working class.
Well, people who are unpaid to work in the art world.
So what I found is lacking in your instruction. Let's say the book is about the instructions how to write. Properly to write about the art. I found there is no declaring of the position of the writer. What class you belong for when you are writing about some particular things that are happening in the world. And the art world, I know this is...
I think you want to determine a very specific position and singular position from which one can write.
But I am not using your instructions.
No, nor should you. But I'm absolutely not interested in creating a singular position from which to write. You're right on that. I'm not
singular. I am just saying about declaring your position when you are writing, because there is a lot of writing in the first world countries as well, where a writer is writing from the abstract position, from like above things what are happening on the earth. So this is, I'm speaking that this is not the last position, let's say. If you are speaking about the art workers, and you are probably thinking you are kind of the psychic worker, I don't like critic, I don't like artist, psychic worker who is doing the job. And this position, if it could be declared, it would be a great thing, isn't it?
I don't know what you mean by psychic workers, I'm sorry.
People who are
fortune
trying to create meaning.
Oh, what's wrong with trying to create meaning?
Sorry?
What is wrong with trying to create meaning?
It's okay. I'm just talking about the job, how to do it. Not about the position, who is able to do it, but about the job, who is doing it.
But
this is worker's position.
In the introduction, I explained really carefully that most art writing is not art criticism. You're not writing art criticism. You're not writing as an art critic. There's a lot of this weird anonymous nameless, positionless writing, which is as if it's written by committee, when we all know that's not the truth. There's always an author behind it. I really do spend a long time looking at potential positions which work across from criticism, evaluation, and comment, all right, just reportage. And I actually, there's a page in here which is just a million in-between positions between those two places, some recognized, some not. So I would dispute that I don't look at the position from which you're writing. I think I really tackle that, actually. But I'm, you know, you read it attentively. Thank you for reading my book attentively.
Okay, hello. So we're talking a lot about art students.
Yep.
And I'm one of them. I'm an art student, and I just want
Fine art. You're an artist.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like not an art student, printmaking student. So I just want to thank you a lot because it helps. It really helps to write about your art because basically majority of art students they're not teaching us how to write. They're teaching us how to draw, but we need to write about the things we're drawing. So actually, I don't have any questions for you, but I just want to thank you a lot.
Oh, thank you. I have an answer to your non-question, which is that, you know, when I work with artists and they write about their work, and then they come to me with their statements, and my first question is, did you love writing this statement? Did you get great joy from writing it? And they, of course, look at me like I'm crazy. No, this was hard. I hated it. You should love it. You fought for this space to write about your work. And you should use it however you want. And for some reason, artists in their studios work with machines and technology and collaborations and ready-mades and all kinds of things. But when they write, they get very self-conscious and they produce this thing very personally and artisanally. And in your writing, you should have all of the freedom that you have in your studio. Use whatever means work for you, including stealing texts, by the way, all writers do it. And, you know, you have total freedom to do it. And remember, you fought for the space to write about your own work. You really did. And you should take advantage of it. We're now in a position, I would say, that we don't listen to critics, okay? As a critic, I can admit that. We listen to artists. Artists are much more visible and listened to. People like Hito Sterl, or Liam Gillick, or John Kelsey, or Francis Stark, people who are very good writers and artists, are listened to much more. And they're not really judging art, they're not criticizing art, they're looking at the culture at large and able to comment in very interesting ways about it. And you know, it's if you're an artist now and you can write, you have a huge advantage, not least because you're constantly asked to justify and explain and fundraise and do all those things that once upon a time, you know, artists could just work in the studio. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of artists wouldn't mind going back to that, having talked to many about it. But you know, the writing is here to stay. But you know, enjoy it. And also, if you're writing, write 6 different types. Write a lot. You know, like one thing that writers do is they're comfortable with writing. You know, they throw the words around. They're all free. They're all cheap. You can use them. And you don't, you know, try stuff out. It doesn't work. You try something else. It's just words. Really. You know. But thank you. Most writing questions are very simple and basic, so you can ask simple, basic questions.
You mentioned about the importance of uncreative writing. What would you do when you feel like, no, this joy is missing, I need to write something, or maybe it's some kind of writer's block? What would be your recipe, so to say?
Okay. Well, I actually, when I work with artists, I give them 6 other ways to write. like there's a million ways to write. If you have a friend who is a good writer, have a conversation. Warhol is a great example. Warhol was such a weak writer. Does anyone know how many books Warhol produced in his life? Does anyone want to guess? Over 100? Okay. Stephen King produced about 72. Of course, most of those are illustration only. I'm cheating, I admit it. But some of them are 800 pages of solid writing. And he found a way to make writing work for him. Like always, he stole from others. He collaborated with other writers using a tape recorder, and he produced book after book after book. some really terrific ones, like the diaries. Okay, so you can work with collaborators. Sometimes try telling a story. What's good about telling a story is that people are forced to make things make sense, to follow things rather than just listing sentences. Try writing a story. It might work, might not. Try painting a picture. Try just describe the thing, and there might be something interesting that comes out of your description. There's techniques. You can look at. You can use ready-made text. Why not? I don't have any problem with that. Be inventive.
Can I ask a quick question about looking? I mean, you spoke, really clearly and eloquently about the need to respond to work and to use concrete language rather than abstract language, and to look rather than generalize. How do you feel about kind of slowing down? I mean, slow thinking and slow looking and slow writing?
Yeah. I mean, that would bring me to the question of who are you writing for? I always feel like I'm writing for the artist. I really don't care what people think, but with the artist, if she likes it, I'm happy. And so in that sense, if you're looking really attentively at their work, piece by piece, and thinking imaginatively about it, the artists are usually very appreciative of that. They don't want to be told back what they've said about their work. And if you can show it, if you can show where you got the idea, they're very responsive, actually. So I think that slowness is a kind of generosity. And also, for example, if you're reviewing, like some exhibitions or an artist's work, artists sometimes fail, and it's okay. And you can talk about works that succeed and works that fail. I don't think, if you look at an exhibition, if you look at things not individually, you say the whole thing's good or the whole thing's bad. And actually, it's very rare that art is unilaterally didn't work. And it's okay to try something and fail. That's okay. But I think you can. Artists are actually less resistant to that kind of assessment. But you have to look very carefully to figure out what someone might have been after, or not even, or whether things succeed or fail. I think otherwise, it's when you get art critics who hate all video, or they hate all conceptual art. It's like, well, you're not really looking. Each work is different. So I think it's that kind of care. It's like curiosity. If you're not curious, why bother? And I will say, this is not your question, but I read almost no art criticism. I mean, I read some art magazines because I kind of have to, but by far I read mostly literature, poetry, good literary writing, of which the art world there isn't a lot of it. So you want to aspire to the Toni Morris, to the great writers, rather than the like pretty good art critics. That would be also so the really that you're really thinking about language on a very high level, rather than how can I be the best good art critic or art writer.
That's really interesting. I mean, it's not about me. That seems really quite important as an art critic.
Yeah, and also it can. Well, actually, I'm not sure. I think it is always about the art critic. Always right if you're in a good mood. Otherwise, you'll hate all the art you see. No, I think there's it's an admission that it is a lot about. That it is about the art critic. It is about that reflection, and that you can't extricate yourself from how you're thinking. But you can explain it. You can think generously.
Because over the last couple of days we've been speaking a lot. Sally O'Reilly, who's here as well, and I, with the doctoral students at the Academy, about writing, kind of academic writing, critical writing, performative writing, and talking about their relationship to their own writing within their PhDs, and what kind of writing goes on, and how they feel about it, and the kind of the challenges of trying to speak on behalf of their work, and using words as part of the toolbox that's available, to do their research and to realize their practice as a PhD project.
Right.
And so the relationship that they have to their own writing has been super interesting. Kind of hearing them talk about how to be closer to it, or to be somewhat estranged from it, to struggle to find the right kind of words, to think about what appropriate tones are, or what kind of sources to draw on. Should they be reading academic text? Should they be reading fiction and literature? What does it mean to write in a more poetic, in inverted commas, way? And then, to do all of that within the context of an institution that has rules and regulations and certain kinds of directives when it comes to, supporting what a PhD can be, I guess. And we're always encouraging them to not so much comply with the regulations of the institution as to encourage the institution to rise to the challenge of their practice, he said, optimistically.
On the back of that. I mean, I think the internet has been a great thing for art writing. It's been a very opening up. I mean, my generation, if you wanted to write about art, you had to go through an editor, you had to go through an official channel, a magazine or a newspaper, get copy edited, and that was the only way you had a voice. And for example, you always had to speak in the third person, as if you weren't there. And the internet has opened up blogging and a lot of much more imaginative type of writing, speaking in the first person, admitting that it's I. How that then folds into an institution is interesting, right? Because the world is changing. But I think the internet has been a boon, a total boon for art writing. It's just people are much freer and they're much more relaxed. Somehow, if they're committing their words to paper, they're much more self-conscious, and instead of they're just writing blogs and writing their own stuff, and we're used to constantly, it's the difference between writing like this and writing like that, or writing, like this. That's different ways of writing, and it sounds different and it looks different, and I think they're all possibles, and so far so good. I think it actually is. We've lost a lot of the self-consciousness of the requirement to sound academic. We no longer feel you have to sound that way to be taken seriously, and you don't. So, yeah.
We've got 2 or 3 minutes.
Anyone have a last question? It could be a dumb question.
or
not dumb, but a less,
or a fantastically smart one.
Or a detailed question.
Just a complimentary one.
Yeah, or you can say nice things.
Thanks for the presentation. I want to ask you what you think about the role of judgment in the contemporary art writing, because previously it was way more important. No?
Yeah.
Since you are talking also about literary forms as like the way how contemporary writing should be.
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a really important question. I think that it's very hard to judge art. You're not invited to judge art, and in fact, there's an important story by this woman, Chris Kraus, who is invited. It's called Faces. It's in her new book, where she's invited to respond to the artwork. And in fact, when she gets to the artist studio, the artist has invited her. She's not only not asked to judge the work, she's not asked to comment about it at all. She's left basically taking dictation. The artist tells the writer what the work's about. So that worries me, because anytime an artwork has a single message that you cannot veer from there, I don't think that's positive. But I think there's very little space for judgment, and I review a lot, and it's even positive. It's much more common to be working alongside the artwork than to be judging. Having said that, like some people sometimes ask, can you write a negative review? Of course you can. Of course you can, and you should. I think it's more important to support it. It's a question of bad art, or is it art that's bigoted? Is it art that's problematic on some other level? I think usually the judgment, the assessment looks along those lines rather than any other criteria for good and bad art. And then I think that there should be that kind of assessment, and that seems to continue.
And on that note, I think it's time for us to bring proceedings to an end. If you just join me in thanking Gilda and Agnė very much indeed.